Hello, welcome to the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews, brought to you by the Sci-Fi-Christian.com. I'm Ben DeBono, and I am talking to you today about Neil Gaiman's brand new novel, just released today, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I was actually lucky enough to get a brief head start on this. I pre-ordered it on my Kindle, and I got an email around 11 o'clock last night that it was processed and downloaded or whatever. So I got to do some reading last night and then finish the rest of it today. Fairly short read, but I don't think that's cause for disappointment. I actually think that that's part of the charm of the book, which I'll get into in just a moment. But suffice to say, as you could probably guess based on how quickly I read this book, it is a masterpiece. This is a great, great book. I loved it. 5 stars easily. For all of us who have been waiting years for Neil Gaiman's next adult novel, the wait has been well worth it. This is a great, great book. The trouble is how to talk about it. And I'll tell you what I mean there. You don't want to know anything about this book going in. Not because there's some huge reveal or anything like that, you have to be spoiler phobic or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I mean, if you've listened to our podcast, you've heard me and Matt talk. I try to be sensitive to spoilers because I know people do make a big deal out of it, but I also am of the opinion that that part of modern pop culture is very overdone. I think the spoiler phobia is really nothing. It's not nearly as big a deal as people make it out to be. A good story should hold up whether you've been spoiled or not. So this is not about spoilers. What it's about is the experience. This is a type of book that you just want to go into without any preconceived notions about the plot or the characters or anything like that. You really want it to just hit you and be willing to experience it. Not because there's some huge twist, not because you're going to be blown away because you've never seen a plot structured like this or anything like that. It's not that type of book, but it's a type of book that is going to make you think and feel things that are going to be much more profound if you feel and think them authentically, rather than because you read some preconceived or pre-outlined plot summary. The plot is and the characters are almost irrelevant to the book, and that's overstating the case by quite a bit. But I say that to make the point that this is not a book about plot twists. It's not a book about even major character development. I think even in one of the closing pages, the main character says something along the lines of, well, I don't know that I've really changed because of what's happened. And so it's not like that, but it's about the experience of childhood as seen through the eyes of an adult. And it's a very, very profound book because of that. It's going to make you think things about your own childhood. It's going to make you look back on your own life. There are just sentences that will hit you very hard in an emotional and resonating way. And those are probably going to be different for everybody based on your own experiences of growing up. I mean, I'm sure there's things that hit me that wouldn't hit you and vice versa. But this is a very powerful book even though it's about childhood, it really is a book for adults in the sense that it challenges you to think about what it means to be a child, what it means to have that type of world view where you see the world as open to possibilities, where you don't question in the same way that adults do, but you accept and you are willing to enter into life as it comes to you rather than trying to force it into the way you think it should be. One of the great metaphors that Gaiman keeps bringing up in this book to try and explain this concept is he mentions a few times that, adults take the road, but children aren't bound by the road. They'll cut through the yard and they'll take the shortcuts and all of that. And I think that really is a big part of what he's trying to say, is that there is something that we lose in growing up, and it's not that we want to go back and be children again. That isn't what the book is saying, but that we've lost something and that we need to contemplate it as adults and really think about what that childlike worldview is and whether or not we're really better off jettisoning it in our mature adulthood. The way that he talks about childhood versus adulthood reminded me so much of the way C.S. Lewis does, especially in connection with the Narnia series, where he talks about adulthood not to mean maturity, not to mean somebody who has reached a certain age, but to mean that sort of you've grown up and you've abandoned this sort of wonder and awe in the world that you once had. And for Lewis, that was obviously a tragedy. At the end of the last battle, I mean, that's why Susan isn't there, is because she chose to grow up. And I think that's a very poignant part of the series that's often overlooked, that's kind of the one irredeemable sin that the people who've been brought to Narnia can commit, is that they choose to grow up, not in the sense of getting older, but in the sense of maturing, but in the sense of abandoning what made them able to accept Narnia in the first place. And this book is so much about that concept. It really is a 200-page exploration of that idea, of the antithesis between childhood and adulthood, as defined by C.S. Lewis and now defined again in the same way by Neil Gaiman. And it's a masterpiece. I cannot say enough good things about this book, even though I have to speak about it very vaguely because I really don't want to ruin it for anybody. You owe it to yourself to have that type of experience where it just hits you and you're not waiting for some plot point that you read about or heard about before. So what else can I say here, outside of just throwing out random superlatives? I do want to talk about the epilogue a little bit. And I know that I'm in very dangerous territory here, where I need to tread very lightly. I'm going to be vague, but if you do want to turn off because you don't want to hear anything about the epilogue, by all means do so. I'm not going to spoil in any sense, whether by giving plot points or by describing the plot in a way that would kind of take away from that experience, but consider yourself warned regardless. The epilogue could easily have gone in kind of a cliched, cheesy, let's tack on a happy, sentimental ending sort of way, but it didn't. Instead, it really challenged you. The main character is sort of challenged in those final pages to think about his own experience of living up to that childlike ideal. Has he really left that behind, and how is he actually doing with that? Is he doing well as an adult in avoiding that sort of stuffy, grown-up trap that Neil Gaiman is warning us about in this novel? And I'm not going to say what the answer is in terms of that challenge that he feels in those final pages, but I will say that I think that challenge isn't just for the character in the novel, it's also for all of us who are reading it. And I think that's something that I know I'm going to be thinking about and wrestling with as I move away from this book. But I think that to me sums up the thesis of this novel in a nutshell. How are you doing? You read these fantasy stories, you read sci-fi, I mean, all that's great and it's in vogue in pop culture, but how are you really doing with that stuff? Is that making you more childlike in the C.S. Lewis type ideal? Or in spite of all this widespread acceptance for genre fiction and everything, are you still falling into that trap of seeing that as more childish stuff and stuff that, yeah, maybe we indulge in, but it's really just for kids? And to me, when I think about what Matt and I try and do at the Sci-Fi Christian in terms of digging into genre fiction to look for something deeper, and why I personally am not satisfied when somebody walks out of a superhero movie and says, "Oh, it was great, you just turn your brain off and you're going to have a good time." To me, that's not enough, because that's saying, well, it's, it's kind of kid-like, but if you just, shut off your brain, don't think about it, you're going to have fun, just watch the explosions. And I don't think that that's right. I think that we need to, if we're really being childlike in the way that Lewis is challenging us to be, and I believe that Gaiman is challenging us to be, then turning off our brain is the last thing we should do. Rather, we want to get to that childlike place and enter into the story, because these fantasy stories, science fiction, superhero, whatever, has something very profound to say to us about our humanity. And leaving that behind, whether it's in the form of turning our nose up at genre fiction, or thinking that genre fiction is just something we shut off our brains to and indulge in, both of those are the same mistake, because they lead us to rejecting that ideal that's presented so clearly in this book. So I'm preaching instead of reviewing. I apologize for that. But do yourself a favor, please read this book, and please think about it as you do. I think it has very important things to say. I think it's a challenging read. It's an engaging read. It's a quick read, and it's designed to be, you should follow up on that, since I mentioned I was going to at the beginning. This book, for as much as I wanted more at the end of it, and I didn't want to leave the world, it's the perfect length. It doesn't, I think more, if it was a 700-page book, that kind of idealism would be lost in the vast plot. And that's not to say Neil Gaiman can't write a big book and have it be great. I mean, I love American Gods, and it's a very long novel. But this, for the message, for what it was about, it needed to be something shorter. And it was, and it works perfectly. So if you're like me and you originally saw that page count of around 200 pages and you felt a little disappointed, don't be. This book is exactly what it needs to be, and I hope that you read it, and I hope that you love it as much as I did. So for now, that's all for now. I am Ben DiBono, and this is the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews, and I am signing off. Goodbye.